Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm Tammy Diedrich, the Managing Editor of IBM Systems Magazine Power Systems Edition, and I'm the moderator for this event. Today's webinar is sponsored by EXTOL and is titled 5 Reasons to Rethink EDI on IBM I. Our featured speaker today is Jim O'Leary. Jim is the Vice President of Product Strategy at EXTOL International and is an expert on strategic business and IT project planning. Jim has more than 20 years of senior and executive management experience with software companies and holds a deep understanding of current technological drivers across multiple industries. Today, Jim will share why businesses impacted by rapid changes in the IBM I solution landscape are rethinking their EDI strategies to reduce risk, gain flexibility, and improve EDI results. Following the presentation, we'll have a brief Q&A period, so please feel free to enter your questions in the question panel on your screen anytime during the presentation. Now, without further ado, thanks again for joining us today. And Jim, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. And again, thanks everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Let me start with a quick explanation of the origins of the subject matter I'll be covering. EXTOL, first of all, is a provider of EDI middleware and tools for the IBM I platform. And because of that, we have opportunities pretty much every day to talk with businesses about their EDI needs and strategies. And just about all of the businesses we talk with already engage in EDI, but for various reasons, they're looking for a change. And over the course of many such conversations, some common change drivers have emerged. And that's what I'll talk about during today's webinar. What are the factors that are driving companies, specifically those using IBM I, to change the way that they implement EDI? So let's start by identifying some of the most common business problems that are driving change. And behind each of these problems is one or more technical causes, which I'll get to in just a minute. First, there's customer service and satisfaction, and most of the companies that we talk with sell products or services to other businesses. And EDI is the main conduit for orders, invoices, and other electronic documents that drive their businesses. So EDI problems tend to become customer satisfaction problems. Next are chargebacks and other financial penalties that result from failure to meet service level agreements, like sending a document that contains errors or maybe responding late to an inbound document. But even worse is the possibility of losing business due to a pattern of service level violations. And many of the companies we talk with keep a careful eye on vendor scorecard ratings, for example, which can provide specific feedback on EDI service levels. Then there are processes and process errors, that result from EDI shortcomings like incorrect shipments or late shipments or high return rates in a consumer goods company. And then finally, there are opportunity costs, which of course are difficult to measure, but they inevitably accrue when a business spends excessive time on EDI implementation or problem solving instead of making progress against more important goals. Now, these business problems may have a variety of causes, some with technical origins and others are related to processes or personnel, for example. But based on the history of discussions that we've had with businesses seeking EDI change, we've boiled down the causes to 5 main factors, and here they are in no particular order. First is poor operational visibility and control, which is the inability to monitor what's going on in your EDI environment and to fix exceptions before they become problems. Second comes unmet EDI capabilities or capacity requirements, and this is most common with companies that have outgrown EDI solutions that are designed for small businesses. The third factor is the cause and effort of EDI implementation and operations. Total cost of ownership for EDI products and services varies widely between providers, of course, and it's not uncommon to hear from a business that it costs too much and takes too long to get the results that they're looking for from their EDI solution. The fourth factor is inadequate vendor support, and this problem has been exacerbated by changes that have occurred over the last 10 years or so in the IBM I market, and I'll talk about those later. And finally, there are businesses with integration needs that exceed the capabilities of their current EDI solution, and that can sometimes be the main driver for change. So these are the 5 drivers that we're going to zero in on during the rest of this presentation. And in the course of covering each one, I'll talk about EXTOL customers who came to us with those problems and how they successfully conquered them. Why don't we go ahead? We're going to push a few polls during this presentation, and I'd like to ask you to take a look at the poll in the poll window that will open up on the right-hand side of your screen, and maybe just take a few moments to answer the question. The first question, how does your business currently manage EDI? And while you're answering that, maybe I'll just make a few more comments here. Let me make a quick point about what actually triggers EDI change to start with, which is different from what drives it. When a business approaches us with unmet EDI needs, there's usually some disruptive event that has triggered their search for a better solution. And examples of that are changes in business ownership or organization, like a recent merger or an acquisition or a spinoff, or the need to accommodate new requirements from a major customer or large trading partner, or the need to integrate EDI with new enterprise applications, or reintegrate with an application after an upgrade has occurred, or sometimes it's a platform change, which of course has wide-ranging impacts beyond EDI. So those kinds of disruptive changes are, first of all, very hard to ignore because of their impacts, but also because they usually come with deadlines. And disruptive changes bring their own requirements for EDI, but it's really solving the ongoing cumulative problems that I just covered, where much of the business value lies. So I just want to make it clear that the list of factors I'll be covering isn't comprehensive, but the majority of cases that we see includes at least one of the 5 factors. Okay, all right, great. Now we have the results of the poll. It looks like 60% of the attendees do manage EDI in-house, 8% outsource, 16% do some combination, meaning, for example, that they might engage a service provider to do implementation, but then they manage it after that, and 16% don't currently have EDI at all. So that's a pretty representative set of percentages, I'd say, based on our experiences. Okay, before I dive into the details, let me just take a minute to introduce EXTOL in case you're not familiar with us or what we do. We are a privately held independent software vendor. We build and market software products for EDI and other kinds of business integration, and we directly support our products from our headquarters in Pennsylvania in the U.S. EXTOL serves customers in many industries, including just a few examples: transportation, distribution, logistics, food and consumer packaged goods, retail. All sorts of industries are represented in our customer base. And our customers use our software to integrate external trading partners with enterprise applications and data, and in some cases with cloud applications and services. We're seeing that increasingly. Now, there are 3 main things I'd like to draw your attention to that we think makes us different from our competitors. First is our commitment to ongoing development and support for EDI integration on IBM i. We've operated in the IBM i market for over 20 years, and the majority of our current customers run on the i. Second is our focus on time to value and total cost of ownership. Most of our customers are mid-sized businesses with very thin IT staffs, so the focus of our product strategy is on productivity and ease of use without sacrificing power. And finally is our acclaimed customer support and service staffed in our U.S. headquarters. We really take pride in providing personalized one-on-one support and in going above and beyond customer expectations. It's really one of the biggest reasons that companies end up choosing EXTOL. Now, I'm not going to be talking much about our products during the webinar, in fact, not at all, except for this slide. But I do want to quickly cover the main capabilities we offer so that you understand what we do better, and also because the project examples I'll be covering use the technologies that you see in this diagram. In the bottom half of the diagram are 2 EDI integration products that run on IBM i. On the left is EXTOL Business Integrator, which is a platform-independent middleware and tool solution that includes EDI integration as part of a broader set of business integration capabilities. And on the right, EXTOL EDI Integrator for i is a high-performance native IBM i solution for EDI integration with applications and data, integration with applications and data on the IBM i platform. And you can also see at the top that we provide complementary communication products, and we also provide implementation and management services for EDI as well. Okay, it's time for our second poll, so let's push that out, please. And the second poll question is, how long have you been using your current EDI product or service? And there's a range of possible time frames there. This, I think, should be an interesting question because the IBM market is, as we all know, quite a mature market, and EDI products have been around for a long time. And we tend to encounter businesses that have used their products for a long time. But we'll check back in a second for the results of that poll if you wouldn't mind just answering the question for your own case. Oh, just one more side question or side comment about this slide. All of the project examples I'll be covering, except one, use the EXTOL EDI Integrator for I solution, the one in the lower right, the native IBM I solution. And the other one used EXTOL Business Integrator. Okay, let's move on and return to our 5 drivers and examine them in some more detail. We'll use the simple reference diagram that you see here to illustrate where each problem occurs. And let me just quickly go through that. The top layer of the diagram depicts the main elements of the EDI lifecycle, starting with implementation on the left and moving to operations on the right. So, for example, mapping and resource integration and other specifications created on the left get deployed to the EDI runtime environment in the middle, and then execution of those EDI assets are monitored and managed using mailroom and dashboard and other kinds of tools on the right-hand side. Below that, we see EDI infrastructure, which determines the capabilities available to the runtime assets above. So that would mean some type of middleware runtime environment, what used to be an EDI translator, but typically these days is a more capable set of middleware services. And at the bottom, we see the platform layer, which represents a broader set of integration concerns that I'll touch on toward the end of the webinar. Okay, let me take a pause here and return to the poll results. So looks like a pretty even spread in answer to the question how long you've been using your current EDI solution. And most, I'd say the average is between, let's say, 5 years and over 10 years. So that's a pretty typical, I think, response given the situations that we run across most commonly. Okay, returning to the diagram, I just want to make a comment about the EDI vendor box that we see in the lower right. If you engage with a vendor like EXTOL to provide implementation or operation services, then that vendor relationship is critically important to your overall solution, obviously. But even if you self-implement and self-manage using licensed EDI software like our products, your vendor's level of support and commitment to your requirements can be important success factors as well. So I'll touch on vendor support as one of the 5 factors later on. Okay, let's move forward and look at each of the 5 factors in the list at the top, including examples of projects that address them, starting with poor operational visibility and control. Now, this factor can be manifested in many ways. The worst case occurs when exceptions and errors go undetected. For example, if a batch of orders arrives but doesn't get processed. But even when problems are detected, they can sometimes be difficult to diagnose and fix, and the cause could be incomplete or unclear error messages or inadequate tools that make it difficult to pinpoint the location or the nature of an exception, for example. And even once you've diagnosed a problem, it can still be difficult to solve if the right capabilities aren't exposed by your EDI solution. For example, resending data with a new control number. And another common complaint is the lack of tools that enable business users to do their own monitoring and reporting without involving IT. Now, too many EDI solutions can behave like black boxes that consume and produce data but make it difficult to see what's going on. So that's the essential problem we're talking about here. The typical case we see is when a business is still using an EDI solution from 10 or 15 years ago. And another common case is when businesses outsource EDI to a third-party service provider, and that provider doesn't provide adequate tools for directly monitoring and tracking results. So that's actually the situation that existed before we worked with Challenge Dairy, which is our first case study here. Challenge Dairy is the largest seller of butter products in the western U.S. They're a co-op representing, I think, something on the order of 700 dairy providers. And their main customers are large retail companies like Walmart, Costco, and so on. They have a very limited IT staff, so not only did that contribute to the problems they were trying to solve, but it also governed the kind of EDI solution that they were looking for as a replacement. Here are the key challenges that Challenge Dairy came to us with, and it's a long list, but it's not that atypical. They were losing documents. There were no notifications or very few notifications in the system to tell them when an exception arose. Sometimes connectivity problems went undetected. There were acknowledgments that they couldn't reconcile with messages, and it took a long time to onboard new partners, sometimes months. And as a result of all those problems, they encountered chargebacks. They got chargebacks from retailers. They had all sorts of complaints that they had to field and manage. And daily EDI activities required a full-time equivalent, which is for the level and volume of EDI traffic that they had at that point was really pretty excessive. And finally, as I mentioned before, in their case, user departments had no direct access to EDI or EDI processing results. So as a result of replacing their existing translator, here are the results that they achieved. First of all, the new implementation was delivered by us, actually, under the deadline. And ongoing EDI operations and maintenance was implemented, again, by EXTOL using EDI as a service. So we provided the professional services to implement and maintain their EDI system. Partner onboarding now takes just a few hours, and small changes like version upgrades, for example, for EDI documents are almost immediate. Business users also have the tools now that they need to monitor and report on EDI activities and results. So in this case, the solution for poor operational visibility and control was to replace their old aging EDI solution with a more modern solution that provided the capabilities they needed. Okay, let's move on to the second change driver, which is the need for new EDI capabilities or capacity. And again, there could be multiple situations included in this. Perhaps you've outgrown a PC-based EDI translator and can't process the growing volume of EDI transactions that you're faced with. Or you might have partners that impose strict service level requirements, for example, for real-time response or near real-time response and turnaround. We'll see an example of that in a minute. You may need support for non-EDI documents like flat files, for example, which is another common requirement. Some EDI solutions aren't capable of handling complex multi-format flat files or integrating with databases using multi-table schemas, for example. Or you might have specialized requirements that call for advanced EDI features like repeating elements, which are used mostly in healthcare today, or SDQs, which are used commonly by large retailers to manage shipments to multiple locations. So EDI solutions really vary very widely in their ability to provide capabilities like these. It's not uncommon to come across a business that uses an EDI solution that may have been a good match when it was acquired initially, but no longer meets their current requirements. And Delta Dental of Wisconsin is a good example of that. Delta Dental is the largest dental insurance benefits provider in Wisconsin. And at the time that they approached us, they had, and this has gone up substantially, but they had around 15,000 EDI transactions processed daily. Most transactions arrived and were processed in real time, and some transactions required time-limited responses on the order of a second or two. Now, the challenges that they had were they were using, first of all, two different EDI solutions, one for batch and the other for real time. So they originally started with a batch EDI solution and tried to make it work for their real-time turnaround requirement and couldn't get it to work. So they brought in a second solution to handle the real-time case, but they were still unable to achieve their target response of 1 to 2 second turnaround at times of peak demand. So at the times of greatest EDI volumes during the day, they found that their response time degraded significantly. And the final challenge was that they outsourced implementation of their EDI system. So it was an expensive proposition to get new partners onboarded and to make changes. What they did was they decided to replace both of the translators with a single solution from EXTOL for both batch and real-time EDI. And on the real-time side, they reduced their average real-time response to 1.1 seconds, and that includes peak load time. So there's a particular feature called pipelining in our product that provides this capability. They also, by the way, were able to reduce batch processing windows by 50%. So that tells you something about the performance capability of our native IBM I product. Okay, the third change driver for EDI is the cost of implementing EDI processes and managing EDI operations. And this includes the effort required to onboard new trading partners and make ongoing changes to EDI versions and maps and interfaces and other implementation elements. And depending on the tools available and the nature of the requirements, implementation projects can range from hours to many months. So getting the right tools and the right match to the skill set that you have in-house is very important. This driver also includes the time and cost of daily EDI operations, and that can vary from a fraction of a full-time equivalent to multiple people in larger companies with large EDI transaction volumes. And that cost goes up if business users can't directly monitor and report on EDI activities and results, because IT in those cases must be involved in every request for information. And then there's the problem of hard-to-use tools and the scarcity of specialized skills in many IT organizations. Businesses sometimes acquire solutions that are a poor fit to their internal capabilities. And sometimes a business finds itself with no EDI capabilities at all. And that's the situation that Wise Foods found themselves in when we first talked to them. So Wise Foods is the largest regional snack foods company in the U.S., mainly in the eastern part of the U.S. They were part of the Borden Company, so they were a subsidiary of Borden initially. And Borden decided to spin off Wise, and Wise had previously been using the internal EDI services at the parent company within Borden, so once they got spin off, they found themselves without any EDI capability at all. So their first decision was to outsource their EDI operations and implementation to a service provider. But that posed some challenges. First of all, adding partners and new transactions was slow and costly through the service provider. Secondly, they were unable to directly monitor or resolve communication and EDI exceptions. So they basically were at the mercy of the response and skill set provided by their service provider. And finally, the expense just got to the point where they decided, that this is just intolerable. They calculated that moving EDI in-house would save at least $100,000 per year. So they replaced their EDI as a service solution with an in-house product solution, again, based on our product. And they chose IBM I and our native EDI solution because of the throughput requirements they needed. And again, we delivered the initial implementation and did that transparently to their partners. And since then, Wise has, through their own devices, quadrupled partner connections and expanded EDI to include a number of other processes in their company: inventory movement, vendor-managed inventory, pricing, payments, and other things. So this is a case where a company without any means to handle EDI on its own started out with an integration as a service solution and then decided to bring EDI in-house. And we see actually the inverse of that as well. Sometimes companies find that they're unable to manage in-house and decide to outsource. So both cases depends on the situation at the specific company as to which case makes the most sense. Okay, the fourth driver is inadequate EDI vendor support. And this is one that we find in almost every EDI decision we see. and that's especially true in the IBM I market, where most of the pure-play EDI vendors have been acquired by larger companies or have refocused on other platforms and solution areas. And as a result of that, very few options remain for companies looking for native IBM I EDI solutions. Product fixes and enhancements may not be available for the product you're using, or support may be unresponsive or poor quality. Now, except when a vendor discontinues support altogether for its EDI product, or support gets to the point where it's so bad that you're really forced to seek an alternative. This factor is generally a contributing factor for change and not a primary one. So I don't have a specific success story for this driver, but I do want to take just a minute to draw out some of the differences in vendor support levels that we hear companies talk about most frequently. Now, the bottom rung here, sort of the base level of capability and service, is occupied by vendors who offer products that run on IBM I but fail to provide adequate support for their products. And typically, those products don't support newer IBM I versions, and almost always do not support or do not exploit any new features in IBM I releases. The next step up are vendors that offer supported products but don't actively enhance them. So it may be that a vendor supports new IBM I versions. Bug fixes may or may not be available for the release of record, but at least they're providing support, and you can get them on the hotline and resolve problems. So it's a step up from the previous case. The next level, going up the ladder, we find vendors with products that continue to see periodic enhancements, but don't actively support and exploit the IBM I platform. So most of these cases are vendors who are still in the market, still sell their products on IBM I. Their marketing focus might have shifted away from EDI and IBM I, but they do still sell those products, and they still support them. And the sort of top of the ladder are vendors that continue to support and exploit new IBM I releases and provide the highest level of customer support. And in those cases, and this is something, of course, we pride ourselves on, that you can reach knowledgeable support specialists on the first try, and regardless of the IBM I release you're working on or the product version you're using, we will still attempt to help you solve problems. One telltale sign of a vendor's commitment to a product is whether their sales and marketing organization continues to actively promote and sell the solution. And the reason it's important is not just as a signal of where that vendor's commitment lies, but also it's a sign of an active user community, and also the availability of service providers for that product. And another important question to ask in this area is whether a vendor support function is outsourced or offshored. Obviously, if you're not talking to the developer of the product, you're going to get a different level of expertise than if you're dealing directly with the source. Okay, let's move on to the last driver, which is the case where a company has broader business integration requirements. And in this case, there are, again, a number of possible cases here. It might be that your company has the need to integrate not just EDI or not just do B2B integration with your trading partner, but also has a need for integration between internal applications or data stores or whatever. So application and data integration needs might be there. You might need to integrate with cloud applications. You might need support for multiple kinds of documents, not just EDI and flat files and databases, but also XML and spreadsheet documents, for example. You might have a need to integrate across multiple platforms in a heterogeneous environment. And in some cases, and I'll talk about this in just one second, you might have a need for, you might have a need to replace the platform. Now, we do see this occasionally. Sometimes it's a mainframe replacement. Sometimes it's an IBM I replacement. Sometimes it's a different platform, perhaps one of the legacy Unix environments. But those cases do come up. Now, I don't have a particular example of an IBM I replacement, but I do have an example of a mainframe replacement, and that is USA Truck. USA Truck is a trucking company, a van carrier and commodities transporter, and they had a mainframe environment with in-house written ERP and EDI solutions. So lots of custom code written in-house. It was costing them a lot of money, not just to maintain the mainframe, but also to maintain all of that custom code. So there was a decision at the board level to modernize their EDI systems and move onto a new platform and replace a lot of that custom coding with off-the-shelf products. The challenges that they faced, the biggest challenges they faced are, first of all, that the project was time-boxed by the mainframe renewal lease date. They had a very tight implementation time frame. And secondly, with respect to EDI, they were using an underpowered Windows-based EDI solution. They started moving off their custom EDI, moving partners slowly off their custom EDI solution written on the mainframe onto this PC-based product, but then they found that it lacked the horsepower to pick up to process the volumes that the mainframe EDI system had been able to process. So that wasn't working out for them. So they engaged in a very large migration project. It took 7 months from software installation to project completion to replace their EDI system. They also, of course, moved their ERP and other components off the mainframe onto an Intel-based platform. That's a separate part of the project, but it was a very large effort. They switched to the new EDI solution in a way that was transparent to their trading partners, and increased service availability at the same time, ending up with around $1 million of savings per year. And by the way, we did the implementation there for them as well. So that's another professional services project that we did. However, USA Truck, once that project was done, they assumed ongoing maintenance and operations of the system. Okay, before we wrap up here, I'd like to let's push out one more poll question, and this question is, what is your business's biggest EDI challenge? So we've talked about the 5 drivers, which you see in the list in this poll question already, and again, as I said, typically we find companies have at least one of these problems, but we're also giving you another choice in case we missed one. So please just take a minute to answer that question, and be sure to hit the submit button, and we'll get to the answer to that poll in just 1 second. Let me wrap up here with just a few quick points before we get to the Q&A session. A few key takeaways that I think are really important if your company is looking to change the way it's doing EDI. The first one is keeping metrics, keeping measurements on direct costs, EDI costs, and that includes the cost of onboarding and change requests, the cost of daily operations. Now, a lot of these are people costs, but they could be license costs as well. They could be external service provider costs. So, and of course, in the case where you're using an external provider, these costs are typically easy to track because they're in your budget every year. But a lot of companies that have in-house managed EDI find it very difficult to keep a handle on exactly how much EDI is costing them. So this is the first step. Figure out how much you're paying on, you're spending on EDI. Even if you haven't kept metrics before, start today, and in a few months you'll get a good understanding of what your ongoing cost profile looks like. The second thing is to maintain records of indirect costs. Now, these are very difficult to measure, first of all. And secondly, it's sometimes difficult to prove that a cost is directly related to a problem with EDI. But they include things that are easy to track, like chargebacks, and things that are easy to track but difficult to measure, like shipping errors, and comps shipping charges, and product returns, and vendor scorecard deductions. I mean, those are things that have an impact on your ability to get new business, but again, it can be difficult to pinpoint exactly what the cause of a scorecard deduction might be. But anyway, these are things obviously that have a big business impact. So where possible, it's good to, first of all, at least record these things, and then secondly, take a stab at identifying what the cost associated with them is. The third suggestion is to think strategically about future requirements and options when you're acquiring new EDI capabilities. Now, all of the cases that I covered in this webinar were EDI replacement cases. And I don't want to suggest that EDI replacement is always necessary. But when it is necessary and you're looking to replace an EDI system that you're currently using with a new solution, be sure to spend time not just on a gap analysis, but also spend sufficient time thinking about what might come in the future. Talk to your partners and find out if there are any pending projects where they're going to throw new requirements at you that may determine what kind of solution is best suited to your future needs. And finally, use those disruptive events that I talked about earlier, things like mergers, acquisitions, spin-offs, new enterprise application installations, upgrades to applications, major customer requirements, platform changes. Those things are generally triggers, again, because they have immediate impact and usually carry deadlines. But they're not usually where you find most of the value in EDI replacement. Most of the value occurs in those 5 change driver areas. And speaking of those, we have the results of our poll, which is pretty interesting. Very few, well, let's just go from top down. The biggest driver for most people in the audience is broader business integration requirements at 32%. And then we have implementation and operations costs or effort at 23%, followed by unmet EDI capabilities at 18%, and then finally we have sort of a tie at the bottom between poor operational visibility control, inadequate EDI vendor support, and other. That's interesting. The biggest challenge in 9% of the cases was vendor support, which is, as I mentioned, kind of unusual as a primary change driver. Okay, that's the end of the prepared material, so it's time to move forward to our question and answer session. And I'd like to take a minute to introduce Tammy Moyer, who will be joining us to answer your questions. Tammy is the EXTOL product manager for our native EDI solution on IBM I, which I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. And Tammy's worked for EXTOL in a variety of capacities for over 10 years, including her current product management role for, what, Tammy, about 4 years? Is that right? Tammy may not be unmuted. There she is. Okay. Tammy, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. And Tammy is very knowledgeable, not just on EDI and our EDI products, but also on how our native solution works on IBM I. So if you have any technical questions in any of those areas, we'll be glad to answer them. So I will then turn it over for the Q&A session to, is it Jenna or Tammy?
It's Tammy Diedrich. I'll take that. So we'll take just a few minutes to answer some questions now. Again, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen to send it in. Okay, first question. I noticed that one of the customers you mentioned outsources EDI operations but maintains the software on-premise. Why not just host the EDI software as well?
Okay, Tammy Moyer, let me take a shot at that. Okay. And please add to this if I miss anything, but the main benefits, so again, just to be sure we're clear about what we're talking about, this is a customer, and we have a number of these customers who actually have our software running on-premise behind their firewall, but we provide services from our managed services team and our professional services team for new development. And we connect remotely and manage their system on their behalf. Now, why do it that way instead of host the EDI software in the cloud, for example? Well, there are a couple of advantages I can think of. One is that having the software on-premise makes it easier to do integration with on-premise applications and data. For example, if you want to integrate with some RPG applications, it's far easier to do that if your EDI software is running on your System I than on your IBM I machine instead of running in the cloud. The other key advantage I can think of, and Tammy, maybe you can add to this, is if you ever want to switch from managed operations to self-managed operations, so you decide, okay, well, we're pretty comfortable with the system, we think we can manage it on our own, then switching to that self-managed model is very easy if the software is already running on-premise. It's simply a contractual agreement change, and that's it. Tammy Moyer, any other thoughts on that?
No, you hit the nail on the head there, Jim. You're right.
Okay.
Great. All right. Any tips for quantifying the indirect EDI costs you mentioned on that closing slide?
Oh, boy. Well, I covered a couple of these. I mean, things like chargebacks, for example, are pretty easy to quantify, right, because they're things that come out of your budget. And most companies that get chargebacks from their customers generally keep a pretty good handle on how much they're spending in that area. The tough ones are the indirect costs, like, well, I mentioned vendor scorecard deductions, for example, or it's very difficult to characterize what damage you cause when you lose a batch of customer orders and the processing gets delayed, or you ship products late because of internal process errors, or those are the kinds of things that are really, really difficult to measure. I don't have any great suggestions about how to measure them, but the most important thing, I think, is to record them, is to make sure that you've written down how many times those various types of problems have happened. So when the time comes to evaluate your need for improved capabilities, you've got a record of the problems you're currently encountering, and you can make sure that the means to avoid those problems are part of your evaluation criteria for a new solution. Tammy Moyer, any other thoughts?
I agree with you. I think since they are indirect, one of the first things you have to do is identify them. And then once
Absolutely.
once you identify them, you may be able to start taking those metrics, maintaining the data about them. And once you have that and can do that, you can strengthen your monitoring efforts of these costs and also include the cost of the resources to manage it when it occurs.
Yeah, and let me just mention one more thing. I mean, we have seen cases, too, where a customer comes to us and says, I've got and this is sort of the opposite problem, I've got a huge revenue opportunity with a new customer, or maybe it's an existing customer with a new project, but I don't have the capabilities in my current EDI software or solution to address the needs that this customer has. For example, it might be that this customer doesn't want to exchange standard EDI documents at all. Maybe they're XML documents or web services or something like that. So there are cases where revenue, especially revenue-dependent changes, are the things that are driving a decision. And the tough ones, though, are where you know or you think you've lost revenue because of a capability that you didn't have in the past and you can't prove it.
All right. Can you share what the main differences are between your two EDI products that run on IBM I?
I can take that
Tammy, you want to take that one? Okay, great.
Sure. Yep. The main difference is we have our EXTOL EDI integrator for I product, which runs natively on the IBM iOS. You access it through a green screen or a web-based interface. It was designed specifically to process EDI transactions with your trading partners. Our EXTOL Business Integrator, as Jim mentioned, is platform independent. It is called EBI. It runs in the IBM I Portable Application Solution Environment, also called PACE. And you connect to that product through virtual network computing, also called VNC. And EBI contains a broader tool set to transform additional data formats.
Yeah, and let me just add to that, if I could, Tammy.
Sure.
We see, as Tammy Moyer just mentioned, EXTOL Business Integrator, which is the platform independent solution we offer, does run on IBM I. We do have customers who have IBM I environments who choose to run it on Windows or Linux, though, for example, and then integrate over the network with their IBM I resources. So that's another option, just to make sure that's clear.
All right, can you suggest any best practices for generating error notifications? Or what kind of exceptions do your customers capture most often?
Oh, Tammy, you want to take that one too?
Sure, I can take that one. Some of the best practices for error notifications or just general exceptions that may not be errors in the system are first to identify the point of failure or the point of exception during the process that you would want to be notified. So based on which point in the process that the exception or error is identified, it would helps you identify where it occurs and guide you toward the severity of the error. It also helps you direct the notification toward the right person or group of people to handle the error. And depending on if it's a direct notification to a person or an indirect to a log, you would also set that up into reusable processes so that once you identify these points of failure or exception, they can be used across all of your trading partners or documents throughout the system. The kinds of exceptions, yes, Jim?
Sorry, keep going. I thought you were done, Tammy.
Oh, no. I was going to say the kinds of exceptions that we catch most often or that we see our customers catching are, for our inbound EDI, would be duplicate interchanges, whether your trading partner or your message is not found or a process not launched, acknowledgement errors. Additionally, for both inbound and outbound, any process failures would want to be caught and you would want to send a notification. That includes whether you have custom-defined errors, all your translation or transformation errors, and any communication errors that can occur. Anything else that you can think of, Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce something you said about best practices for implementation. You mentioned that it's important to figure out ways to implement notifications in a reusable manner, right, so that you can use them across all of your trading partner relationships. And there are a couple of specific techniques, for example, using process templates in EBI and sort of embedding standard notification routines in all of your processes. That's one approach. Another one is using built-in exit points in the product that allow you to sort of trap errors at different points in processing and generate notifications for every case of that type of error.
Okay, what was the enterprise adapter for Mapix that was listed for the EEI product?
Tammy?
We, through one of our partners, we offer a adapter that allows you to interface with the Mapix product, and I believe Mapix was bought out by Infor, so that tool is it's available through a partner relationship.
All right, and what percentage of your customers manage EDI in-house versus outsourcing?
Let me take that one, Tammy.
Okay.
Well, first of all, the percentage of our customers who manage in-house is rather large. I think that, and this is just a guess, it's certainly less than 10% of our customers use our managed services. And I would say that, well, it may be even much smaller than that. The other thing, just to make sure I mention this, though, is there's sort of two service aspects that we've talked about in this webinar. One is the services for implementation, and there's a larger percentage of customers that take advantage of that. I'd say, I don't know, maybe 30% at most of our customers use, well, maybe up to 50%, depending on the case, use our services to either implement or assist them in implementing their EDI system. And the vast majority of those, though, once we're done with the implementation, take over the management of day-to-day EDI operations.
Okay, what is the EXTOL Integration Studio?
Tammy, I'll take this chance to show off my limited technical knowledge, and then you can pick up the details. How's that?
Sure.
EXTOL Integration Studio is a design time client application that allows you to build EDI integrations and other kinds of integrations, for example, for data integration cases or application integration cases. So you use that EXTOL Integration Studio to build and test your integrations and then deploy them to EXTOL Business Integrator. So that's a tool that is sort of the design time companion to the runtime EXTOL Business Integrator product. There is the sort of equivalent EDI implementation capabilities in EDI Integrator for I are actually built into the EDI Integrator for I product, so there's no separate design studio for that case. Tammy, you want to add to that?
Nope, that's right. It's the design time portion of the product. And then for monitoring, you would use the auditor, which can be accessed outside of the client, and the dashboard product for both EEI and EBI.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jim and Tammy, for sharing your expertise with us today. Just a quick note that we will be sending out a link early next week to a recording of today's presentation to everyone who's on the call, as well as to everyone who couldn't make it, who registered for the event but for whatever reason couldn't make it. So that concludes our webinar. I want to thank everyone for attending, and have a great day.